My brother framed me with drugs to get me expelled from Stanford because he didn't get in. My parents helped by texting him during my hearing. Now that he's dead, they're begging for forgiveness, but I got a restraining order. I'm 26 years old. I work in real estate, and I make more in a quarter than what a lot of people see in 2 years. And yeah, I'm going to sound like a presumptuous asshole for saying that, but you need to understand the contrast with where I started this story for it to make sense. 7 years ago, I was living in what was basically a closet in Portland, eating ramen and wondering if I was ever going to get out of that hole. And all because my younger brother decided to destroy my life because he couldn't get into Stanford. And I did. And my parents, I mean, the people who were supposed to protect me, helped him do it. Let me back up, because this didn't start with Stanford. It started way before. I grew up in a pretty normal suburb, upper middle class. You know, the type of place where everyone has nice cars and cares too much about how the lawn looks. I have a younger brother, Justin, 3 years younger than me, and for as long as I can remember, my parents treated him like he was made of pure gold. I'm not exaggerating. Like, I could bring home straight A's, and my father, Richard, would barely look up from the newspaper. But Justin would bring home a C+, and there was a complete celebration, my parents telling him how proud they were of his effort. My mother, Barbara, always had some excuse, that Justin had more difficulties learning, that he needed more support, that I was naturally intelligent so I didn't need the same attention. Which, looking back, is a pretty twisted way to punish a kid for being good at school, right? Justin was the one who got the latest iPhone model every year, the one who had a car when he turned 1, 6 he had to buy mine with money I saved working at a movie theater. The one who could do basically whatever he wanted, without consequences. One time, I think I was like 15 and he was 12. He broke my laptop, literally threw it down the stairs during a fight. And when I told my parents, they just said that accidents happen and that I've been more careful about where I left my things. I had to work all summer to buy a new one. But the thing is, I got over it, you know? I thought, well, life isn't fair. At least I have good grades and I can get out of here eventually and go to a good university, and that's exactly what I did. I worked my ass off throughout high school. Ended with a perfect 4. I was in robotics club, did volunteer work, had good test scores, the whole thing. I applied to Stanford and some other places, but Stanford was my dream. My father had gone there, which I thought would help me, you know, being legacy and all that. Turns out Justin also applied to Stanford that year. His senior year, while I was in my first year of college somewhere else taking general classes. He had like a 3.2, mediocre extracurriculars, and honestly wasn't even close to being competitive for Stanford, even being legacy, but my parents acted like it was a done deal that he'd get in. March of that year was when the letters came. I got in, Justin didn't. And I swear to God you could cut the tension in that house with a knife. My parents barely congratulated me. Like my mother said, "Oh, that's nice, Nathan," in the flattest tone possible, and then immediately went to console Justin, who was in his room throwing a tantrum. He was 18 at that point, by the way, not a little kid. I heard my father telling him that Stanford had made a terrible mistake, that he was just as smart as me, that the system was rigged. Which, great message to send to your kid who just got rejected, that it's not his fault and that his brother somehow cheated the system. Things got weird after that. Justin basically stopped talking to me, which honestly was a relief, but then I started hearing things. Family friends would mention they'd heard I had cheated to get into Stanford, that my father had paid someone. Stuff like that. At first I thought they were just stupid rumors, but then my cousin asked me point blank if it was true that I'd hired someone to write my admissions essays. I finally traced where all this was coming from and, surprise, it was Justin. He was telling anyone who would listen that I didn't deserve my spot at Stanford, that I had cheated, that I was a fraud. I moved to Stanford that fall, and honestly, it was amazing. I was finally away from all the toxic family dynamics. I was surrounded by smart people who actually wanted to learn. I had a great roommate named Jake, who was from Portland and studying computer science like me. I kept my 3.9, joined the robotics club, was doing cool projects, had even caught the attention of a Google recruiter who came to a networking event. Things were finally going well. You know, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was being recognized for my actual work, not living in the shadow of my parents' golden child. I should have known it was too good to last. My sophomore year, like halfway through fall semester, these fake Instagram accounts started appearing. Someone was impersonating me, using photos I'd posted on my actual social media, and these fake accounts were DMing Stanford students offering to sell them study drugs. Adderall, mainly, but other stuff too. I reported the accounts, obviously, but new ones kept popping up. It was like playing whack-a-mole, you know what I mean? You hit one and two more appear. Then, in November, like 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, campus police showed up at my dorm room. They said they'd received an anonymous report that I was dealing drugs, and they had a warrant to search my room. Jake was there, thank God, as a witness to everything. They went through everything, and they found a bag of weed and some unlabeled pill bottles hidden in this weird crevice behind my desk. 3 people knew about that hiding spot, me, Jake, and this kid from the floor who had shown us all the good hiding places when we moved in because supposedly he'd lived in that same room the year before. I swear my heart stopped when they pulled out that bag. I had never seen those drugs before in my life. I didn't even smoke weed because I was too paranoid about screwing up my grades, and there was campus police telling me I was in serious trouble. They arrested me right there, handcuffed me, the whole humiliating experience with everyone in the hallway peeking out to see what was happening. Jake was yelling that this was insane, that he lived with me and I'd never had drugs, but it didn't matter. But it gets worse. Turns out 3 different students, people I'd never met in my life, filed sworn statements saying I had sold them Adderall. They described my dorm room correctly, knew details about me you could find online, but that definitely made it seem like they knew me. The university suspended me immediately pending a disciplinary hearing. I couldn't go to classes, couldn't be in academic buildings, was basically a ghost on my own campus. The hearing was like 3 weeks later. My parents came, which I thought was a good sign. Like maybe they were finally going to support me for once. How stupid I was. They sat there through the entire hearing without saying anything, while I tried to explain that I'd been framed, that I'd never sold drugs to anyone, that I didn't even use drugs. I offered to take a drug test, offered to show my bank records to prove I didn't have unexplained cash deposits, brought Jake as a witness who testified that I spent basically every night studying or working on projects, never went out partying, never had visitors buying stuff. And here's the part that still makes my blood boil 7 years later. My father was texting during the entire hearing. He kept looking at his phone, typing things, and I was thinking, seriously? You can't even pay attention while they decide whether to ruin my life or not? Years later, I found out who he was texting. It was Justin. He was sending him live updates from my own disciplinary hearing, like it was a sporting event. Like, they just presented evidence of the drugs. Now the witnesses are speaking. I think they're going to expel him. Literally helping my brother enjoy my destruction in real time. I got expelled. Despite Jake testifying for me, despite me offering any kind of proof they could want, despite having no prior disciplinary history and having a 3.9, I got expelled. And Stanford refused to release my transcripts, which basically meant I couldn't transfer anywhere else. 2 years of work that I paid for with student loans and money I'd saved, just gone. Poof. Like it never happened. My parents drove me back to their house after the hearing, the quietest car ride of my life, and that night I heard my father on the phone with Justin, laughing about something. Laughing. His son had just been expelled from college, his future basically destroyed, and he was laughing with my brother. I packed a bag that night, took all the money I had, which was like $1,200, and left. Didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, just left. I was 19 and basically had nothing. I ended up in Portland because Jake was from there and told me I could crash on his couch until I got back on my feet. But Jake was still in school at Stanford, obviously, because he hadn't been falsely accused of dealing drugs. So I was basically staying at his parents' apartment, which was incredibly awkward. I found this room someone was renting that, I'm not kidding, was a converted pantry. Like, I could literally touch both walls at the same time if I stretched out my arms. It had enough space for an air mattress and my laptop. That was it. It cost $400 a month, which was all I could afford because I was working at Walmart, doing deliveries for DoorDash. and waiting tables at this super sketchy sports bar that was definitely laundering money but paid in cash and didn't ask questions. There was this diner called Dots where I'd go because they had free Wi-Fi and didn't care if you stayed there all day as long as you ordered something. The waitress, Linda, was really cool. She could see I was going through something, and sometimes she'd bring me free food saying the chef had made too much. She probably saved me from starving, honestly. I'd sit there between shifts and code, work on my own projects, trying to keep my skills sharp even though I wasn't in school anymore. I built this complete inventory management system just because I was bored and angry and needed to do something productive. That's how I met Mark. He owned this real estate office and came to Dots all the time. And one day his laptop was acting weird and I offered to help him. Fixed his problem in like 5 minutes. It was just some malware nonsense, and he asked if I did freelance work. I told him I'd do basically anything for money at that point, and he hired me to do some audit work for his office at $20 an hour. Which doesn't sound like much, but was literally life-changing for me at that time. I started doing more and more work for Mark's office, fixing computers, setting up their network, eventually building a complete website for them. Like 8 months after moving to Portland, he offered me a full-time job as his IT guy for $45,000 a year with benefits. I cried when he made me the offer. I'm not going to lie. I could finally quit working 3 jobs. I could move to a real place with a real bedroom. I could eat food that wasn't ramen or whatever Linda could sneak me. But here's where things got interesting. Mark had this agent who got sick the day of an important showing, and there was basically nobody else available, so he asked if I could just show the house to these clients. I was like, I don't have a license. I don't know anything about real estate. But he said he just needed someone to unlock the door and answer basic questions. So I did, and turns out I was really good at it. The clients were tech workers relocating from California, and we could talk about all this tech jargon, and they felt comfortable with me, right? Away because I wasn't this typical aggressive real estate salesperson. I was just a tech guy like them. Mark saw something there, I guess. He sponsored me to get my real estate license, which was absolutely mind-blowing because those things cost money and time, and he was basically betting that I could do this. I studied my ass off, passed the exam on the first try, and started selling houses. And here's the thing. I understood technology, and I understood how computers worked, and I understood data. So I built this whole website that predicted market trends based on tech employment data, migration patterns, all this stuff. I started focusing completely on tech workers, relocating to Portland, and I exploded. My first full year selling, I made $88,200. Second year, $145,000. Third year, $285,000. This last quarter alone, I closed $1.8 million in sales. I have a nice house now. Nothing crazy, but like 2,800 square feet with a proper office and a yard for my dog. Pseudo, yeah. I named him after the Linux command. I'm that kind of nerd. I drive a Tesla because why not? I earned it. I have a girlfriend, Jessica, who's a pediatric surgeon and makes even more than me, which is great because there's no financial weirdness. Things were finally good. I built this life completely from scratch, without help from my family, without my Stanford degree, just pure hard work and luck and people like Mark and Linda who saw something in me when I had nothing. I hadn't spoken to my family in 7 years. Not a word. Changed my number, blocked them on everything, basically made it clear they were dead to me. So, like 3 months ago, I'm working from home on a Wednesday, and someone knocks on my door. I open it, and there are my parents, standing on my porch. They hadn't seen me in 7 years, didn't know where I lived, and they just showed up. My father's first words, and I swear I'm not making this up, were, "This place is smaller than I thought it would be." I just stood there, literally stunned. Like, what do you say in that situation? Hello, parents who abandoned me when I needed you most. What brings you by? My mother immediately started crying, saying they were so sorry, that they'd made a terrible mistake, that they needed to talk to me. I was like, how the hell did you find my house? Turns out Jake, my old roommate, who's still my friend and now works at Google, had run into them at this tech conference and at some point mentioned where I lived. Which Jake felt terrible about afterwards. It wasn't his fault. He was just making small talk. My father started explaining why they were there, and here's where all this gets absolutely insane. Justin had died. Car accident. Leaving some club in Vegas like 3 weeks before they showed up at my door. He was like 26. My age now. And apparently after he died, while they were cleaning out his stuff, they found his journal or something where he'd written out the whole setup, how he'd created the fake Instagram accounts, how he'd paid that kid from the floor $500 to plant the drugs in my room after he told him where the hiding spot was, how he'd paid those 3 students $500 each to lie and say I'd sold them Adderall, every detail of how he destroyed my life because he was jealous that I got into Stanford and he didn't. And Jake, bless him, when he ran into my parents, he showed them all the evidence he'd been holding on to, because Jake's a computer science genius, right? When all this was happening at Stanford, he'd saved screenshots, IP logs, had traced where the fake Instagram accounts were coming from. It all pointed back to Justin. But by the time Jake had compiled all this, I'd already been expelled, and Stanford didn't want to hear it because they'd already closed the case. So my parents were standing there on my porch, telling me they now knew the truth. That they were so sorry. That they really had believed I was a drug dealer. How, by the way. But whatever. And that they wanted to try to rebuild our relationship. My mother kept saying, "You're our only son now," which, thanks for reminding me I'm only worth it now that the golden child is dead, really makes me want to let you back into my life. I told them to leave. No yelling, no drama, just, you need to go now. My father tried to argue, saying they'd driven all this way, that we should at least talk, that family is important. And I just said, "You're not my family. You haven't been for 7 years. Now get off my property." Closed the door in their faces. And I watched through the peephole as they stood there for like 5 minutes before finally going back to their car. I thought that would be the end of it. But no, they came back 2 days later, knocking on my door while I was on an important work call. This time I didn't open the door, just yelled through it that they needed to leave or I'd call the police. My father started yelling back, saying I was being unreasonable, that they'd lost a son and were trying to get the other one back, all this manipulative garbage. I called the police. They showed up, talked to my parents, basically told them they needed to leave and not come back unless I said it was okay. Jessica, my girlfriend, thinks I'm being too harsh. She comes from this big, close Italian family where everyone forgives everything, and she keeps saying, maybe I should give them a chance, that they're clearly remorseful, that life's too short. But she doesn't understand. They didn't just not defend me when I needed help. They actively helped Justin destroy me. My father was texting him during my hearing. My mother didn't even question the accusations. They chose to believe their son was a drug dealer rather than consider that maybe, just maybe, their precious golden child was jealous enough to make up an entire elaborate lie. I'm filing a restraining order. Jessica says it's going too far, but honestly, I don't want to deal with this. I don't need them. I built this life completely. Without them, and it's a good life. I make good money. I have a nice house. I have a dog who actually listens to me. Seriously, Pseudo responds to Linux commands. It's great. I have a girlfriend who loves me, even if she thinks I'm wrong about this. I have friends like Jake and Mark who actually showed up for me when it mattered. You know what really gets me? It's not just that they believed I was guilty. It's that even if I really had been dealing drugs, shouldn't your parents at least try to find out why? Ask what was going on? Offer help instead of just completely abandoning you? But they didn't do any of that. They just cut me off like I'd never existed. Like 19 years of being their son meant absolutely nothing compared to protecting Justin from the consequences of his actions. Last week, my mother sent me an email. I don't know how she got my address, asking if we could at least talk on the phone. She said they understand I'm angry, but they've been going to therapy, working on their issues, and they really want a chance to make it up to me. I deleted it without responding. There's no amount of apologies that gives back those 2 years at Stanford. There's no amount of therapy that erases the memory of being in that converted pantry room in Portland, eating ramen for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because it was all I could afford. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just given in to Justin. From the beginning, if I hadn't applied to Stanford, if I'd gone to some other school, Maybe he never would have done all that. But then I realize how toxic that thought is, right? Like, I'm basically saying I should have made my life smaller to accommodate my brother's jealousy. That I should have turned down opportunities because they might make him feel bad. That's crazy. The truth is, I'm probably better off this way. I had to learn to rely on myself in ways most people never have. 2. I built this career from absolutely nothing. No safety net, no family backup. Every house I sell, every client I sign, every commission check I deposit, it's mine. Not because my father knew someone or because I had advantages, just because I worked for it. There's something really satisfying about that, you know? Pseudo just walked into my office and sat at my feet. He needs to go out. Probably. I have a call with a client in 20 minutes. Tech workers from San Francisco looking for something in the $800K range. After that, Jessica's coming over for dinner. She'll probably try the maybe just hear what they have to say conversation again. And I'll keep telling her the same thing, that some things you can't undo, that some betrayals are too deep. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in 20 years I'm going to regret not giving them a chance. But right now, sitting here in this house, I bought with money I earned. In this life I built without any help from them. I honestly can't see why I'd need them. I already lost 7 years trying to get over it, trying to build something from the ruins they left. I'm not going to lose more time letting them back into my life just so they can feel better about their choices. The restraining order gets filed Friday. Jessica says she's coming with me anyway, even if she thinks I'm making a mistake, which is part of why I love her. Pseudo only cares about whether I feed him on time, and if we throw the ball enough times per day. And me, well, I have houses to sell and a life to live, and none of those things require me to forgive people who chose to believe the worst of me when I most needed them to believe in me. I guess that's the story. I built something good out of something horrible, and I'm not going to let the people who helped create the horrible come now and pretend they deserve to be around the good.